Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. I'm going to be talking about web components with Angular. And just like Kim said, I normally give talks with Sherry. So this talk, we actually prepared it together, but unfortunately, she couldn't come. But if you don't know her, I really encourage you to follow her on Twitter, because she's a very active member of the community. She's the organizer of GDG Copenhagen and of NG Copenhagen. And she's also the organizer of NG Vikings and NG Spain. So she does a lot of stuff. So a little bit about me. I'm Anna. I'm a developer advocate for Ultimate Angular. It's an online platform for Angular courses or technologies related to Angular. So if you're interested, come speak to me later. And I'm also an organizer of many things too, such as NG Spain, NG Vikings. I'm the founder of Girls Tech, which is a group for women in tech based in Galicia, which is the region in Spain where I live. Nobody knows where it is, it's fine. If you're interested, I'll let you know about it later. Okay, so just before we get started, let's take a look to see what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, we're going to take a look at Angular components, which I guess you're all very familiar with. And then we're going to go on to web components. And then we're going to see how we can create a web component with Angular. And last but not least, we're going to see how we can add an existing web component to an Angular project. So how many of you are familiar with Angular? Some people didn't put up their hands. Are you sure you're in the right conference? OK. So how many of you know what an Angular component is? OK. So just to make sure that we're on the same page, I just want to go over them really briefly. As you know, Angular allows us to use this component-based architecture. And component-based architecture is a way of dividing the user interface into smaller sections or widgets called components. In this case, we divided this beautiful Sherry's Berries user interface into smaller components, which are the rectangles. And we have the parent components, which would be the orange components, the orange rectangles, and the child components, which would be the turquoise rectangles. Now, the cool thing about components is that we can reuse them. We don't have to rewrite the code 100 times, and we don't have to copy and paste. So if we wanted to do 6 components, 6 cars, which are exactly the same, it just has different product information, we create the component and reuse it 6 times. The whole application itself is also a component. And this is actually a very good practice. When you get a mock-up, if you just draw some rectangles around your user interface, then you can already kind of put out your architecture so you know what's going to be what. Cool, so now we all know about Angular components. I think we can all say that we are very happy with Angular components, right? Are you all happy with Angular components? Yeah? OK, but let's just wait a minute, because me and Sherry were talking, and we found that there were some things missing. And Angular components have a style encapsulation, but it's still not great. How many times has it happened to you that you've gone home, and overnight, someone has touched the global CSS, and the next day you go back into work, and your component looks different? Come on, I want to see hands. This must have happened to people, right? Yeah. So it would be great if we had an actual style encapsulation. Also, it would be great that once we have that style encapsulation, if we could access it from the outside. Another problem is that my fellow friends in React and Vue cannot use the components I create in Angular. And this isn't great. And last but not least, it would be great if we could have something like GSX, where we gain a lot of flexibility and we have everything in one place. We currently don't have that. But I guess you're thinking like, OK, this sounds like something out of this world. What does have all of this? Well, I have good news, because web components provide all of these things. And web components are really awesome because they're completely platform agnostic, and they also allow us to have that actual style encapsulation that I was just talking about. If you want to know if web components are compatible with the framework that you're using, you can check out this website called Custom Elements Everywhere by Rob Dodson. And that way you'll know if it's compatible or not. The good thing is that as we're at an Angular conference, we already know that they are compatible with Angular. OK, so let's take a look to see what web components consist of. They consist of 3 main technologies. HTML template, custom elements, and shadow DOM. Previously, HTML imports were very important, but thanks to ES6 modules and soon to be HTML modules, we really don't have to worry about these anymore. And I really want to emphasize on this, because if you go out after this conference and start searching for web components, and you find an article that says HTML imports, it's probably outdated. So please take note. Now let's see how each of these technologies work. First of all, HTML template. It's pretty simple. It's a HTML tag called template, which we use in our HTML. We can then use it in our JavaScript, and we can clone it as many times as we like. And by doing so, the browser will only pass it once. That way, we gain a lot of speed. But I guess it's time to see some code, right? Just before we see some code, this is what we'll be building today. Very simple web application, but it's to show you the basics of web components. And also, if you're interested in the code, on any slide where you see the Stack Blitz or the GitHub logo, like at the top there, where's my cursor showing? Stack Blitz or GitHub logo, you can click on it and you'll see the code. So here is our HTML template. It's a template tag with a beginning and an end, which inside we put a container, and inside that container we have an image and the information. Pretty straightforward. And then we create a placeholder where we're going to put all the templates, where we're going to clone them in a minute. Now, in our JavaScript, we have reference to our templates. We add the image, and we also add an alt tag because we want to make sure it's accessible. And last but not least, we're going to add the description. In this case, strawberries from Sherry's garden. Then we need to append it to the DOM. But just before we do so, we need to have reference to our placeholder. We then clone the template, and we append it to the DOM. That's it. As simple as that. And we can do this as many times as we like. And this is what I was saying, that the cool thing about it is that the browser is only going to pass it once, and that way we gain a lot of speed. We passed it twice, so not passed it, we cloned it twice. And it's a very simple application, like I mentioned. And as you can see, we have both of the divs here. Maybe you can't see because I'm in front of it. And the bad thing about this, in my opinion, is that there are far too many divs. This kind of looks like a div soup, and this isn't something that we like. So there is a solution to this, and the solution would be custom elements. Now, custom elements is the second technology that we have, and it allows us to create a HTML tag, extend an existing one, or improve it. I might say custom elephants during this talk. Sometimes it happens to me, so I'm sorry. So just before I show you how we do this, a few things that we should take into consideration. The first one is how we actually name our custom element. And that is because we need to give it a unique name. If we just call it red button, there's going to be already like 100 red buttons out there, and it's going to be very difficult to find. The good thing is the Polymer team is currently working on this, so it's not going to be an issue in the future. But for the meanwhile, we need to take care of how we name our custom elements. Also, how we name our attributes, because we have to take into consideration, I can't speak anymore, take into consideration that these are going to be put out there for other developers to use. So if we don't give them an attribute that developers will understand, or just people will understand, then they're not going to have any clue how to use them. If I get a custom element and I see that there's an attribute, XYZ, I don't know what to put there. So make sure that your attributes are as descriptive as possible. So custom elements are inherited from HTML element, which allows us to have these methods. And here in this table, you can compare them to the methods that we're used to in Angular. And as you can see, they're pretty straightforward. So let's take a look to see how we can create a custom element. First of all, we called ours bb-red-strawberry. I think it's pretty unique. BB stands for berry banana, because I'm Anna Banana and Sherry's Sherry Berry, so it makes total sense. And then the attributes, image, and description. I think they're pretty descriptive, so we can continue. Like I said, our custom elements are inherited from HTML elements. So here we're calling our HTML class. Inside we have our constructor, and we call super so that we have access to the parent's APIs. Next, we define our custom element by giving it a name and a selector. I don't know if I'm standing in front. If someone needs me to move out the way, let me know. And then we have our connected callback, which is called as soon as the custom element is appended to the DOM. And here we're having our reference to our image and description. Then we call render, and we're pretty much done. So up to here, we have created a custom element. This is pure JavaScript, by the way. We have created our custom element. And one thing that we do need to do, like in Angular, is to listen to any changes that might happen. And that way, we use the attribute change callback, which is just like ng on change. Cool. So now we don't have so much div soup. We have, instead of a div, we have a name, bb-red-strawberry, opening and closing. And it's a lot easier to debug. But I don't think our dog looks very happy. And why is that? Well, remember how I was saying earlier about the global CSS? And someone decides to go in overnight and be like, oh yeah, it would look really good if in all of our web application, all of the p tags were red, because that's going to look great. Well, it also happened to our custom elements. So what do? We need to add shadow DOM. Shadow DOM allows us to have an actual style and behavior encapsulation, so there won't be any leakages in or out. And it's very easy to add. It also brings a few cool features with it, which I'll talk about in just a second. So as you can see, we have added the shadow DOM to our constructor. And then what we do is we clone the template, and instead of adding it to the DOM, we add it to the shadow DOM. That's it. We now have shadow DOM. Now let's take a look at the cool features that I was on about. One of them is slots. Now slots acts like a placeholder. Don't know if you know ng content, but it's very similar. So what we do is we add these slots into our template, and we can then access it through our HTML and add whatever we need to in there. Let's take a look at the code to see what I actually mean. So here we have 2 slots. Please take note that if you have more than one slot, you need to add the attribute name and give it a name, because otherwise it's just going to pick it randomly. And this is just like ng content. It's the same thing. So in our template, we have 2 slots, title and description, which we then can access through our HTML. And because we love divs so much, we created 2 divs and added the slot attributes. And in this case, we did something very simple, which was just adding the italic to strawberries. But you can add anything you want. You can even add another web component in there if you want to. So slots are a really cool feature. So remember how I was saying that once we have that style encapsulation, it would be great if we could access the CSS from the outside? Well, we can do that through CSS custom properties. And CSS custom properties allows us to give a variable name to one of our values in our CSS, and then we can access it through the style attribute of our HTML, so that developers can then add the values that they want to. So let's take a look. Here is our container, and we have background color, and we gave it a variable name, -- background color, and a default value, which in this case is white. Please note that when you're creating a CSS custom variable, you need to give it -- before the name of the variable. And you can call it anything, but again, please be descriptive. And then we can access it through the style attribute of our web component, and we access it by, again, calling -- background color and the color that we want to add. And last but not least, to remove one layer of div soup, what we can do is apply host to our CSS. And what it does is, so normally what we'll do is have a div just for the sake of having a container and add in the default values that we want to, like width, height, background color. Well, we don't need to do that. So what we would do is we would call host and the name of the web component and add the default values there. And this is our web component. And I don't know if you can see, but out here it says shadow root. So that means the shadow DOM has been applied, and we have that style encapsulation, which is really great. And I'm not the only one that's happy about it, because our dog is also happy about it. Because as you can see, we've added the color red, but it hasn't affected our web components in any way. So web components are really awesome. And there's a few cool things happening with web components. Remember how earlier I was saying that it would be great to have something like JSX? Well, there was a proposal by Apple that was backed by Google, and then the Polymer team decided to create this library called lit-HTML. And I say it's kind of like JSX because it has a similar change detection, just that it's a lot better and a lot speedier. But I'm not here to discuss lit-HTML today. But if you're interested in it, I really recommend that you check out this video by Justin Finiani, who is the creator of lit-HTML. And I'm pretty sure he's better explaining about it than I am. And we were very excited about it, so we did actually convert our code to lit-HTML. So if you're interested in seeing how we did it, you can click on the Stack Bullets logo as soon as I share my slides at the end of the talk. Or if you follow me on Twitter, I'll also put them there. OK, so now to Angular. So as you all already know, I guess, the Angular team has been working very hard, and they've provided us with Angular elements. And Angular elements are a way of creating web components with all the tooling that we're already used to, which is really cool. And it's pretty simple. I'm going to show you how to do it. First of all, we need to install Angular, which I guess you all already have installed, I hope. And then you create a new project. Now, the flags I use are just out of personal preferences. They are not necessary to use for Angular elements. Then we go into our project, and we add Angular elements. And then what we need to do is install the custom elements from web components and save them so that we have access to the polyfills. I'll talk about polyfills in just a bit, because most browsers don't even need them anymore. And then we import our polyfills into our polyfills.ts. And last but not least, we go to our tsconfig.json file, and we change our target to ES 2015, because this is what the browser requires to be able to read web components. Cool. Next up, we just generate our component, which is going to be called card. And that's normally what we get. We then have to import our view encapsulation so we have access to the shadow DOM. So we call encapsulation : view encapsulation.shadow DOM. And this allows us to have that style encapsulation that we really wanted. Now, we're going to use the code from before and just make it Angular friendly. It wasn't a very complex code, so we just added a few interpolations, and it's pretty much done. Next up, we have to give the inputs of title, description, and our source. We need to give it some default values. And one thing is that when we call host, because it's already being declared within the component, we don't need to give it the web component name behind host. Very important, make sure you call display block, because by default it's display inline. And it took us, me and Sherry, quite a while to figure out why our web component wasn't showing, and it was because of this display block. So if you don't want to have a hard time, I recommend that you really remember this. And next up, we just register our component into ngModel. It's pretty simple. We just import the create custom element, which we're going to use when we export the class. We need to remove the bootstrapping from here because we're going to add it later. And we need to add our entry components, and we need to make sure it's the component that we actually want to export, which in this case is card component. And we do this so that it is exported imperatively. Next up is our how we export our class. And there we are using the create custom element, which we just imported, so that we can define our custom element, again, by giving it a name and a selector, just like we did previously. And we bootstrap it all up, and we're pretty much done. So that's how we create an Angular element. And it seems pretty simple, right, up until now. But nothing is simple, right? Nothing's simple. Because the build is not quite there with Angular yet. We have to wait a bit for Ivy. But in the meantime, a good friend of ours who's actually giving a workshop here on Saturday, Manfred, you'll probably see him around, created this library called NGXBuild+. There are ways of exporting it by ejecting your Webpack and doing all sorts of things, but you might not want to do that. So this library allows you to build it in a way that you feel that you need to, right, for your needs. But if you don't want to go through this, then you can just wait for Ivy, which I hope will be happening soon. And now our component is ready. And as you can see, it's just like before. But we have the shadow root, we have our BB card there, and everything is just like before. Great. So how do we actually use this in an existing Angular project? Say we have a web component that we want to use in our project. It's very simple. All we need to do is, again, install the Polyfills from custom elements, from web components, save it to our project so we have access. We import them to the polyfill.ts file. And then inside the component where we want to put that component, the web component, we just import it. But something's wrong. And I wanted to show you this because this is a step that I tend to forget quite a lot. The good thing is that the browser constantly shouts at me and tells me why. So if you see on number 2, I don't know if you can read it from there, but it says, if BB card is a web component, then add custom element schema to the ngModule.schemas of this component to suppress this message. So all we need to do is go to our module, and in our ng module, we'll go to schemas, and we add our custom element schema, and it works. So it's 3 simple steps to add a web component to an Angular project. If you're interested in the code, again, this one's on GitHub. And you can just go and check it out. So can we say that web components rock? Of course, I'm going to say yes, because I really like them. And I really like the fact that we have that interoperability, that we have the actual style encapsulation, because I'm a big fan of CSS. And when something doesn't go right, it really annoys me. But you don't just need to take my word for it. I really encourage you all to go and check out the success stories of web components that are happening, because big companies like ING and BBVA are actually creating all of their features with web components nowadays. So things are already happening in the web components world. And you really don't have to worry about the browser anymore. As you can see, with most browsers, it's fully stable. Edge will always be a bit edgy and a bit behind, but they're actually developing it, so that's really good. And we currently have some amazing polyfills, so there's nothing to worry about. There's no excuses. Go ahead and try it out. Can we say that Angular loves web components? I would say yeah. So I'd like to thank you all, especially because I guess you're very hungry. If you're interested in web components, just grab me, and we can talk. So thank you.
You know, Ryan, it's hard being the talk before lunch because everybody's really hungry and like you can kind of sense that.
Actually, looking at those strawberries, I was starving.
I was starving too. I'm like, oh,
now all I want
lunch?
is strawberries.
But you know what's great is that, you know, in this time of divisiveness and, you know, Republicans and Democrats and Canadians, you know, they're all fighting. And what's great about web components is that it brings everybody together. Yeah. You know, it doesn't matter if you write Angular or React. I can write once and then ship it out to every browser.
Yeah.
Other than Edge, apparently. Where's John? John Papa.
Yeah.
I got some words about Edge and Microsoft.
There's some other Microsoft people. Yeah.
We'll talk to them over lunch.
Right.
Sherry works at Microsoft.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I got some angry tweets to send.
What's your favorite thing of all time about web components, if you had to tell one thing?
Shadow DOM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Like, I don't know how many times it's happened to me that, because I really like design and styling.
Yeah.
And when someone does something in the global CSS and it affects a component, it's just like, so
it's super frustrating.
Yeah.
And in CSS, it becomes very frustrating when it's just not working for you, and it's just, it's always complicated.
And there's always some sort of conflicts between components, and
I didn't like the display block thing, though, that's not default. That is a bit
Right.
frustrating. I was like, wait, why is it not default?
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that in the next releases that will change.
All right.
Angular team, anyone?
Yeah.
But I think we can go to lunch.
Yeah, we don't want to keep everyone.
No,
for lunch,
wait.
but-
Let me tell a story about the biggest burrito I ever had. So there I was. No,
He
okay,
just
I
wants
won't
to
do
make
that.
you all hungry.
After that.
Well, thank you so much. Your
Thank
talk
you.
was great, and like always, web components are amazing. Thank you.